would.
Okay, we can stop now.
Throughout the day.
Okay, we are on. Happy Halloween, everybody. Okay, I didn't hear you. Happy Halloween, everybody. Happy Halloween. All right, now they heard you. Good morning and welcome to Thursday, October 31st, workshop, Lee County School Board. And our agenda is the agenda review. We'll have a break for 10 minutes, then academic services, and Vision 2030, and then the school board attorney will give an update. So let us begin. My understanding, we did not receive any questions prior to the meeting, so that's good for you guys. Okay. So let us begin with, if you can pull up your agenda, and I had a question on reading the, the resolution. And the question is if we had decided, I presume, that it would be assigned to a board member. This is what Susan and Mary were saying, that it would be assigned to a board member, and that board member would then ask the student, because the second part of what we decided is that the student, if we had one, and they were willing to do so, would read the resolutions. Is that what everybody else believes? Was that correct? That the student would read it?
If they feel comfortable.
If they feel comfortable. My question about that is, if we don't give it to the student until that night, I don't think it's giving them time to even prepare if they decide that they want to do it. So can we at least say that whoever, when the agenda comes out, whoever the board member that's assigned to it, get with Susan to make sure that the student has an opportunity to look at and decide before the meeting. Everybody understand what I'm saying? Because I think it's kind of, hard to hand it to them that night and say, do you want to read this? So if they get it ahead of time.
So you want me to email it to them ahead of time?
If everyone is in agreement, can we do that?
Yeah, sounds.
Okay, that way they'll, and when they get here that night, if they decide to get cold feet, then whoever the adult is just takes it over. Okay, that's all fair. All right, so let's move on. Thank you, I can't get it up. We start with consent on academic services. And since we didn't get any questions, we may be out of here real quick. Does anyone have any thoughts or concerns about academic services? Yes.
Well, the only question I have is this MOU with FGCU on the mental health referrals something new? Oh, okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm sick. It is new, and we're very excited about it because the FGCU counseling program has now opened up a counseling center. They have the ribbon cutting tomorrow, and we have been working with Dr. Elise Bartley and Dr. Madeline Isaacs on developing referral pathways for our students. And those referral pathways include a fee of $25 or less for counseling for our students. And those referrals will come through our school mental health professionals.
And for what length of time? Is there, like, you get so many visits, or how does that work?
So that was actually one of our concerns, and our primary questions was if you're going to staff this with interns from your master's in mental health program, what would that look like for our students? Because that also means they're on a semester rotation for their counseling. And what we will be doing is we start referrals in January, even though they've had a soft opening. We're starting the referrals in January because we would like that consistency and the longevity of at least 15 weeks of time with the same intern. That does not mean we can't refer throughout, but what they're trying to do is do more of the students that need some mental health assistance but may not be the long-term therapeutic goals. So that's where FGCU and the school district are developing the most appropriate criteria for the most appropriate referrals. So it's definitely our students that need mental health assistance that would be best served in community behavioral health. However, they would not need long-term therapeutic services. So we're trying to do an 18 to 25 week, but it really would be based on their therapeutic goal. Our next question was, if an intern rotates off that semester, ensuring that there's the warm handoff and a connection and some time for a student to transition to continue their therapeutic services with a new counseling intern.
And how is the screening done? In other words, the referral from us to them?
So in our internal processes in Senate Bill 7030, schools are required to do an initial screener for any type of school-based mental health services. Our district has selected the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire and/or the Pediatric Checklist, and this involves the student and the parent providing feedback on some of the challenges their child may be experiencing through those questionnaires and those screeners. At that point, when we take those results, we determine if a student is appropriate for school-based intervention. That would be a mild to moderate support provided through our school staff. And then if our levels of concern with those screeners indicate outside community behavioral health is most appropriate for more of our Tier 3 needs, that's when we would refer out. And then the question becomes with family, where would you like to go? Because they obviously have that choice. But also, where do we have referral pathways, for instance, to Salus Care, and then also now to FGCU? And really, the depth and breadth of that, the intensity of that service would drive either FGCU, knowing it may be shorter term, or Salus Care, or another provider of the parents choosing.
That's right. Do we have an increase in students needing these services?
This year, we have seen a dramatic uptick in students and even our staff and our families identifying the need. And in talking across the state, when we meet with size-alike districts through the Department of Education. 2 weeks ago, we had a large district meeting, and that's where we really are able to come together and talk about the trends we're seeing. And so one of the trends all of our large districts agreed on readily was the fact that we're seeing an increase in identification. We think that that's because people are now becoming better educated, including students self-identifying and parents and our educators. And that's through our youth mental health first aid training initiatives and just everything that's been out in the media to cover the services that are available and the need to serve children with these needs. So I think it's really a lot of us becoming more aware, but also the increase in our school mental health teams meet every week and the services that we can offer through the school and the referral pathways into behavioral health in the community.
And I know this will be a crazy question, do we have enough of our staff to service the increase that we're seeing?
We do not.
Okay.
And
I
that is
just wanted
across
it on
the
record.
state. I will say that the angst that we expressed at this meeting too is the funding was a good start, and we are still struggling with staffing appropriately to serve the need. So we are in a much better place than we were. We have a lot more work to do, and now we're coming up against a shortage of degreed and certified school counselors, mental health counselors, licensed mental health counselors as well, social workers, and we continue to struggle with school psychologists. And this is nationwide, but it's an exceptional shortage across Florida now.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, two things on that. One, hopefully our bill will get through the legislature, and perhaps we can look at one of our career tech academies being in psychology. So just something to think about. And I am, yes, ma'am.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, and I need to stop. I am remiss to announce the gentleman on the end who I really don't even know yet.
Okay,
so.
well, I just wanted to introduce everyone to my partner, John Quick. John has been a partner with our firm for, I don't even know how long, but a really long time. And I wanted to introduce him because you're going to see more of him. He's going to be more involved in the work that we're performing for the school board.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I
Happy
apologize. Yes, happy Halloween. This is as Halloween as I could get today. I was going to come as a superintendent, but I could not find the headpiece that I tried. Okay. Okay, next.
Hey, once you go this way, it's hard to
Never
leave.
go- I know,
Never go back.
I know. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I had a similar question on the Lead Healthy Start. Is that also a new initiative?
I wish I knew. There we go. Why we have them in the audience.
No, Healthy Start is not a new.
Oh,
Okay.
shame
Wait.
on me. I should have known that then.
No, Healthy Start is not a new MOU. We renew this every year. It's an agency in the community that we work with for our early Head Start children. And they provide references, referrals to us, and we provide information and referrals back and forth. So,
Is longstanding?
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Learn something new every day.
Well, that's why we're here. Thank you so much. Anything else under academic services? Click and see if I have any. I do. No one else has anything? All right, let's move on to business services. And most of these are renewals, right? Okay, human resources. Good morning.
Morning, everybody. I just wanted to talk about two things this morning. One is the instructional calendar. Ms. Vaughn was our, thank you again for participating. Just wanted to remind everyone that that is coming at the meeting on Tuesday, so just wanted to see if there were any questions. There's really no substantial change to this one compared to this year, so, but still wanted to provide the opportunity. I know there weren't any questions up front, but just wanted to highlight that we are going to be bringing that forward to you on Tuesday, and I also didn't know if Ms. Vaughn wanted to comment on her participation this year.
Well, the only thing that I can say is it was very smoothly done. I've never been to one of those particular workshops, and I was told that in prior years, now what did you say? Sometimes it went like 5, 7 sessions, or
I think Dr. Atkins can share with you, he had that experience.
and it was all done in that one couple-hour time period. And I was also told that's because there were a couple people that came and had ideas already. The talc rep and someone else, they already had ideas, so they had already looked at those things,
Right.
which was great. Of course, the only other thing is, and this wouldn't be here, but graduation isn't.
Yeah, we don't put those on the
You don't
instructional
put those on
calendar,
there.
right, yeah.
Is graduation scheduled for, let me just say, not Memorial Day next year?
Mr. Simmons is working on that right now, and so we heard loud and clear.
Not on Memorial Day. So, yeah, I mean, everything else, the teachers really, everybody was counting the days.
Yep.
And so I feel like it was very well vetted, and everybody knew what they were doing when they're talking about the dates, so.
Thank you.
Do, going back a few years, do the schools still get the option for that day off in the
Yes.
new year if they do their open house?
There's
on
there's a
Thursday?
waiver process. They will vote in the spring. They have to have an 80% of all the staff agreeing that they are looking to swap that out. But yes, that option does still exist.
Okay. And just to let everybody know, if they do an open house during the week, they do an opt-out to do a day off later on in the year to take up for that. So that's what I was talking about. And they look forward to it.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So,
then, I'm sorry, anything else on the calendar?
Dr. Spiro was mentioning they're looking at Memorial Day, the graduation, so it is a set deal, is it not?
Well, we're talking about for the
Next year.
following
Oh, for
year.
next year, oh, okay.
Next year's
Oh,
calendar,
okay.
yeah.
Fine, okay. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, my next item is Best and Brightest. I know there was information sent in the board update, but wanted to see if there were any additional questions, and I can provide probably a little more detail on the number of people qualifying for the different awards. So we received approximately $9.3 million. About $1 million of that was for the charter schools. So the remaining money then is to be utilized in the following categories, and I'll just kind of share them with you. The most complicated of the awards is the Recruitment Award, because there are some very specific criteria that the employees have to meet. We have 240 that definitely qualify for the Recruitment Award, and then we have another 80 that we're waiting. They have to provide us some work verification, so we're in the process of trying to collect that. So potentially there could be a little over 300 for the Recruitment Award. The Retention Award is very specific to a list of schools that the state identified that met a certain criteria of having specific learning gains for a 3-year period of time. And those are the only schools whose employees are sort of the gatekeeper to be eligible for the Retention Award. And for that, the employees would receive $2,500 for having a highly effective, and then $1,000 for effective. We have approximately 2,500 teachers that are going to be eligible for that award. About 1,200 of them are going to be in the highly effective category. The Recognition Award is the last category that is available regardless of what school you're at, if you have either an effective or highly effective evaluation. This also includes our instructional paraprofessionals in this category. And currently, we have approximately 3,500 teachers that are going to qualify for that award, and about almost 1,200 paraprofessionals that are going to qualify for that award. That would be $500 if you're a teacher, and $250 if you are a paraprofessional. I think, and then there's also a principal award, and again, you have to be at one of those schools on the list of 50. And we're still looking into, because there's very specific criteria, we anticipate about 20 principals will be eligible for that award. And just to remind everyone, the authority we have to execute Best and Brightest is our talc and spout contract, which the board votes on when it comes forward. So in 10.03, incentive and bonus programs, number 3 very specifically spells out that any legislative bonus programs will be handled through the labor management process. So that's how we arrived at all of this and how the board has provided authority for us to do so. I think what's important for you all to know is a couple of areas that I anticipate you're going to get some of your constituents that may reach out to you with dissatisfaction. One would be teachers that the last couple of years have been receiving $6,000, $7,000 because they had a high SAT score. They're not going to be getting that because the Best and Brightest program is changed by the legislators. So we're just executing the rules that they have set out. So I anticipate that you're going to get some pushback on that. There's also, every year we deal with, there are certain employees, due to the nature of their work within the school, they do not meet the statutory definition for the, and specifically for the Retention Award. That's the $2,500, $1,000. because if you are not a specific in a classroom with students assigned to you for the day, you are not considered meeting the statutory definition. The good news is the recognition award is a broader definition, so your media specialists, school things like that, they will get that award. The other area that I anticipate that you'll hear some feedback is that nowhere in Best and Brightest is there any authority to award assistant principals. There is only principals and then the other awards that I spelled out for you. So I do anticipate that, that might be something that you'll hear about. So now I'm open for questions.
Can they, principals, let's say, share with the assistant principals if they choose?
Well, I mean, the money is going to be given to them. They can, I suppose, do whatever they would like to do.
Yes, ma'am.
So I've talked to a few school counselors who are not eligible.
They are for the recognition award.
Okay.
Not the retention award.
Not the retention.
Or the
okay.
recruitment award.
So, and like principals, they have the whole school.
Correct.
So, since it's a statutory requirement, then does that mean that in order for any changes to occur, we would have to go through legislation?
That is correct, and what I believe I've heard this board say, and maybe not directly, but I also know that Talc and Spalk would support, is that let's just do away with this Best and Brightest and put the money in the FEFP, and let's give it to us and let us make a decision on how to pay employees more.
Right. Thank you.
Well, after attending a training with FSBA about this as well, and the attorney that did the training said the labor relations, the decision as to the amounts and all that in each bucket is decided on between the governance board, the labor relations team, and the attorneys. And
Well, except the Talc and Spalk contract is what supersedes that.
so in other words, you're saying when we do the Talc and Spout contract, we decide at that point, or agree at that point, what this will look like, even though we don't know how much it will be.
Correct.
We divide.
Yeah, that's for all
percentage.
legislative bonus programs, such as your A+, such as your IB, AP, et cetera. It's any legislative quote-unquote bonus program. The program that allows I think it's specifically teachers. It could be any employee that, takes child into foster care. There's bonus money there. Any state legislative or federal legislative program, in our negotiated contracts, we say it specifically says the Talc, and it also says it in SPAC, Labor Management Committee will develop and implement by memorandum of understanding all legislative bonus programs.
In what section is that?
That's 10.03, number 3.
Okay. And when does that come up again? Not until next?
Yeah, we did a 2-year contract, and so it wouldn't be until sometime next year.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
do the principals, teachers, counselors, do they apply?
Not this year, because
Not at
it's
all.
too cut and dry.
So.
The only thing we've asked for that people have to provide, because we have no other way of knowing, is on the recruitment award, there are certain circumstances that if you have work experience that aligns with what you're teaching, then that can document that we recruited you as maybe, let's say, at a higher level because of your work experience.
Okay, so it's left to your department to sift through.
There's been a lot of man-hours dedicated to this entire process.
What if somebody came to school mid-year last year? Does that disqualify them?
It might, if they don't have, there's a lot of different factors. And also it depends on which award it is, about having the number of evaluations that you need in order to qualify. And then you also have to be, you have to be working for the district when the money is paid out. So, there's different qualifiers for that. Oh, and the other thing is our anticipated payout is November 30th.
Oh, yeah, and that was another, if somebody would have qualified but has retired, then they don't get anything.
That is correct.
And that, I think that's been a
Yes.
bone of contention, too.
Yes.
And is that driven by us or by legislation?
It depends on which. I would say the answer is both. The memorandum of understanding for example, for the recognition award, that's very specific to what we have negotiated with the Labor Management Committee.
Okay. For the board's sake, I know we get briefings on this when it comes time, but I would like to see maybe a workshop to talk about even some of the things that other districts are doing, and also, this is so important that I feel anyway, and I don't know what everybody thinks, that we should have on our legislative asks every year until we're heard, that the ask to have it all be put in to FEFP so that we can handle it. And I don't know, how does everyone else feel about that?
Did FBLA, didn't they put it?
They did, I mean, yes.
In their
It's in
legislative?
all the legislatives.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm just saying
And I imagine the union,
Yeah, everybody's asking for the same.
right, so I'm just saying if
yeah,
we
it
could
wouldn't hurt.
add it 2 hours as an extra punch to it to say this is important, and just kind of have it in there until we get some type of answers.
Well, I think that's the process that happens out of SBA,
It
is
does.
that the districts will contribute, and those common asks that carry more punch because more people are asking are in our state priorities.
Right, okay. Okay, any other questions or comments?
All right, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, no, that's fine, go ahead. We are down to operations. Anyone have any questions? I think we're mostly,
There-
go ahead.
Just a couple things about the pre-construction for the schools in Estero, just to kind of refresh my memory on a couple things.
Excuse me.
Will construction begin on both the elementary and the middle school at the same
This is just
time?
the phase one.
Well, I know it's a phase one, but looking ahead, is that what we're thinking? That we're going to be building both at the same time?
But I believe the intention was to have both sites. This is the shared Estero property that's
Right.
next to Estero High School. So the intention was to begin construction, I believe, at the same time, but I can check and get that back to you for.
Okay, and this probably was said, but I don't remember. What are the number of student stations at each one, do you know?
I'll have to send you the exact numbers.
Did we get that ever? We did?
I don't know.
I thought
we
you
did, I
but-
don't
but we
remember.
can
I was
send
just-
it in the
Absolutely, we
update.
can send it to you in
Yeah,
this
I
update
was
for
just-
tomorrow.
I was
Yes,
just
student
curious
stations
to-
And then just the exact year rollout. I just don't want to speak incorrectly without
Okay,
having. the
okay, yeah, I was just curious about those two
Student
things.
stations and the expected opening of the school date,
Well, and if they're going to be constructed at the same time, I'm
parallel
guessing,
construction.
have we done that before? I don't think two schools next to each other being constructed at the same time?
I think back in the mid-2000s, we did do that. I know that the intention of this one was to do that. I mean, if we want to do parallel construction of these two buildings, it saves us
Cost
a
savings.
cost.
Well, that's what I was going to figure, that so typically it would be the same management?
Well, we
on
had
the
some different
two,
discussion
or-
around those particular
Oh,
pieces.
okay.
It's just, as we had looked at different options within this piece, as you know, there've been kind of several iterations of what these two sites would be and how they would be deployed in collaboration with our other divisions. So I'll be happy to speak to all those things in your board update if that would be. We'll provide you all that detail in written statements.
But we are building our basic buildings.
Yes, these are our
We're not-
prototype models, that's correct.
'Cause-
So for full capacity for what we build.
Okay, I know we said that, but
Yes.
I always just like to repeat it and
Yes,
hear
that
it
I can
again.
definitely
Get it
say.
on,
That's on the
get it
record.
on there, on
We'll
the
put it in writing
on the
as well.
video.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Sign off.
Any other questions related to those two pieces?
And I'm just curious, Mr. Ross, I don't know if one of you wanted to talk about the contracting piece on this one. We did have discussions relative to that, but if you could enlighten the board. And what I'm talking about, we're looking at dual sites on both of these, the east zone and also in the south zone, and there had been, discussions about having a single contractor and.
Correct. So for the south zone, there definitely will be a single contractor. We did competitive solicitations for both schools on one, so we have a single architect, a single CM, and a single building official. Now for in the east zone, the current where double M is currently proposed, there is a proposed site for an elementary. However, we did that one a single just for the double M middle school, because at that time we did not know the plans for the additional schools. You can kind of put them out together when you know they're going to coincide, you know the schedule for them. But at that time, since we didn't know the plan for the elementary school, we chose to only solicit the middle school at that time.
And we don't have the state, we have to get the state authority to build the elementary school in the east zone, which is why we were focused on the middle school only, whereas in the south zone, we had both of those.
So technically, you're looking at, during one period of time, building 2 schools in the south zone. Well, we've got those two, we've got MMM and MM, and they're all going to be at some point overlapping in the building process.
That's correct, yeah.
Correct.
Wow.
Well, there was a time in our district where we had, we opened 8 schools, and then the following year, we opened 5 schools. So, I mean, we're back to those type of times.
Yes, and like I say, from a procurement standpoint, the vendor community is excited and they're ready to get to work, so.
Right, so I hope you guys have sneakers, right?
Yeah, we're ready. We've already been running.
Okay. Other questions about any of the building? Okay, no one else has any questions about that? Yes, those. And I believe that, what time is it? Oh my goodness. Okay, I want an award.
No, we all want an award
we're
for
not done.
not having questions.
Okay, I heard you. All right, I believe that is all of the agenda review that we have. And thank you to staff for being here. If you would like to stay for the rest of the fun, you may. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here for this. So let's move on. We have academic services and vision. Oh, we're going to take a break now? You want to?
Why?
Why don't we just keep going?
I think if we just go on to the academic services piece and then look at taking a break after that, how's that? Okay, so let's do that one. Academic services and vision 2030, strategic plan. And they're all coming.
Coming in mass.
This is the time for the holiday thing. I think that would be
So we
something.
gotta
Either get done by then or break at that time. It's just 15 minutes. It's not like, it's just shit that makes it.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are very excited to begin a series of workshop presentations around our district strategic plan and the updated version of Envision 2030. So today you're going to hear from Academic Services, as they are the primary workers in goal or long-range Objective 1, which is increasing academic achievement. At the end of their presentation, we also have scheduled in some time so that the board members who are championing certain areas of the strategic plan will have time to give us an update on their work as well. So today that will be Mrs. Fisher, who is working in the mental health area, and Mrs. Giovanelli, who has been working with the SOS program. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Spiro and his team.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and happy Halloween back at you. This morning, I have with us our directors of curriculum and instruction. This is Candace Alivedo. We have Dr. Bethany Quisenberry and Lori Houchin. But also to the left of me is our team in the audience as well, and they are ready to help provide any background information as questions arise as we go through this morning's presentation. So we are in week 13 of the school year, and what we are going to be talking about today is progress monitoring data that came from around week 7 and 8. So I'd like to remind you that the first week of school, we really encouraged our school leaders to build relationships with students during week 1 of the school year. And there was definitely a difference during this past year, as evidenced by our executive directors and our directors that were in schools, that our leaders really did spend a lot of time during week 1 building relationships with students, and we really feel like that is going to have a long-term payoff for all of us as we continue to focus on the whole child. So, Objective 1 is centered around 7 different objectives. We're going to talk a little bit about our overarching goal of becoming an A school district. We'll delve into the progress monitoring data around proficiency in the areas of ELA and math. We will also talk about where are we with the school grade components. So today's data really centers around grades 3 through 10 as we're focusing in on the school grade components, and so we'll give you an update on that. And then KPI numbers 5 and 6 are really about the achievement gaps. How are we doing closing the achievement gaps in the area of ELA and math? And then the final goal is really around the percentage of students who perceive that there's an adult in a building that cares for them. And those are the 7 goals that we're going to talk about this morning. So before we get into the data, I want to let you know about some action steps that this team has taken during the first quarter. And I think it's important for you to have some context on the background of the work that was done. First off, during the summer and during the entire first quarter, our curriculum and instruction team really worked hard on identifying tiered content support for each school individually. So it was not a one methodology for each school. We really looked at their academic achievement areas and said, these are the various levels of support that our teams need to give those schools. And then they went into those schools and provided the support. As first quarter ended, we have now reconvened our content teams and actually had a data chat with our curriculum instruction teams where we talked about, so what did we see during first quarter? What adjustments to our tiered support do we need to make now in the second quarter as we push towards the mid-year semester? Also, our schools have what are called bi-weekly curriculum briefs. So a curriculum brief is an opportunity for principals, assistant principals, and the teachers of the content areas to see what are the standards that are coming up. So as I'm getting ready to plan for my next lesson, what are the big ideas, what are the standards, what are some key components in the curriculum maps and the instructional guides that I need to pay attention to. Those are done by our coordinators, and they send those out to our schools at all 3 levels. So it's kind of a sneak peek so they can make sure that they're really hitting the big areas. We've also had e-learning walks now twice in every school, and the e-learning walks are done with the directors of curriculum and instruction as well as our executive directors. So the e-learning walk consists of this team goes into a school, they meet with the school leadership team, they look at their data, where they are, they hear what the school-based initiatives are, then they go and they visit classrooms, and then they come back and they provide very targeted and specific feedback around our high-yield instructional strategies that we have been working on for the past 2 years, as well as each of the schools' specific targeted endeavors that they are doing additionally. So every school has had those at least twice. Our assistant principal meetings and our principal meetings are focused around the A, B's, and C's, the attendance, behavior, and the classroom success. And what we're doing this year is making sure that when we focus in on those meetings, we're actually using school-based, real-time data. So when we're looking at, for example, when we look at attendance, we're actually pulling, this is your list of students who are chronically absent, have them identify, are they tier 2 students, tier 3 students, and then they engage in conversations about what they can do to meet the needs of those students. So it's important that it's not a broad overview, but truly they're working with their data and the experts in the room to help them navigate through that process as they try to analyze that information. And then we talked previously when we did an overview when I first came in July about our leading and learning teams. Our leading and learning teams are the catalysts that will make the PLCs drive commonly across the district. They've now been to the district twice, and they come down and they will hear by grade level, by department, or by subject. They hear about the content that should be discussed in the PLCs moving forward. So it's a common approach across the district, led by teachers, that'll drive the work through the PLCs. And that's our leading and learning team. Now, the executive directors and the directors of curriculum and instruction, we spent about 8 days together. This was 2 weeks ago, where we had one-on-one data chats with every principal. And this is different than in the past. In the past, it used to be was either by zone or by principal lead groups. We thought it's important really to give quality time with our principals and any team member that he or she wanted to bring to the table to say, here's our data. This is what we're doing well in. Here's areas we're struggling in, and we need support. And then what other support do we need outside of the A, B's, and C's? And the whole conversation was around attendance, behavior, and classroom success. I think it's important to note that these conversations, the one-on-one principal meetings, took place after our first proficiency test that we had with our students. And so we had saw some trends, and so this past week, after we had our one-on-one principal meeting, principal data chats, that's when we reconvened our content teams and really said, this is what we're hearing from our principals. This is how we need to make some adjustments as well. So we felt that was a very powerful process, not only for the principals. We got a lot of good feedback from principals, thanking for the quality of the time that we took, but a chance to really be in a coaching conversation. It was never meant to be a got you, but other. This is being very transparent with their data and having some honest conversations about what we can do to help support them. Our principal leads are up and running. We've identified our principal leads. They now have their assigned groups. We've had a principal.
Can I ask you a quick
Sure,
question?
Dr. Evans.
Something to point out. I know last year when we did this, we had other schools in the room. As you were doing it this year, you're not doing that. And I think the reason, well, you can explain the reason for
Sure.
that.
I really wanted to provide an environment where they could ask for help and they could really be transparent with their data with not having to look unfavorably with their colleagues. So it was important for us. We literally just right around the table, we leaned in eye to eye. We all looked at the same data together. It was truly us asking questions, them asking questions to us as well, and then leaving saying, okay, this is what we've agreed to do to help you. And we literally had some action steps walking out the door. We didn't want to have a whole table full of people there. We just wanted it to be, because it was early enough in the year, we wanted to have some targeted support for them while it was only the first 9 weeks of school.
And I'm glad you asked that, because I had just written that down, because what I understood is that they all would come to principal meetings and bring their data, and it was like show and tell.
Well, they would come in a large team. So, for example, a principal lead team would bring their whole team to the table, and then you would have each of the directors from all the departments there, and they would ask to identify areas that were they were deficient in or an area they were strong in, which all of that whole process was fine. But we really wanted to just to get down a little deeper for us. That's why we wanted to have the dedicated time with each principal.
So may I ask, so after you have your one-on-one and they share with you, then who goes back into, who does the follow-up to make sure that they're getting what they actually asked for or what they needed?
Sure. So I would be sitting here, I'd have my executive director there, the director there, and the school would be here. And so at the end, when we said, okay, this is what we're going to do, Shanna would say, okay, I'll get with this content coordinator to make sure that they have what you need. Bethany might say, I'll grab this data for you and we'll bring it out to the school. And I might say, okay, I'll get with Mary Lynn Rodriguez, we'll get some people out to the school to provide some support you need in the area of. So we made sure we overtly said that out loud so everybody in the room knew who was responsible for the follow-up. And then before we brought the next group in to meet with us, we literally would sit there and make sure that we followed up right there on the spot.
Okay, so you're bringing Mary Lou in.
Yep.
Who's checking to make sure Mary Lou went?
The executive director.
Okay.
So they had a running list of everything that each school requested. I see where you're going there. Good question.
You can say whatever you want, but is it happening?
Yes, right, exactly, which is why the executive directors are the ones that go back and follow up after that. Each one of them have a running list of their assigned schools, of the commitments we made, and then the commitments the schools made.
And it's in their best interest to follow up, obviously, because, you know, those are the schools that they're responsible for, including, you know, they're taking ownership in terms of that school performance. So, you know, if you're looking at, like, Linda Mayer, she's going to be responsible for our middle schools, and so it's definitely in her best interest to make sure that her middle schools are getting the resources that they need to be successful.
And the follow-through is important for us as we build trust with our schools, too. That's one of the most important characteristics, is keeping your word.
Sorry. And then the rotation, per se, of you mentioned Linda, so how do you decide which schools you go to? And I understand it would be the ones with the need, but then that ends up, you know, the neediest ones getting most of the attention. So is there a rotation?
So not necessarily the neediest ones would get the rotation, is whatever your greatest needs in your content area. And I'll let if one of our directors want to expound on that, because I know we just had our data chats on those.
So in the past, we pushed out our supports based off of their overall tier, and your overall tier can be a lot of different things. Your ESE population, your poverty population, your proficiency, but it wasn't specific to content. And so a big part of what we did this year was we took their trends for the past 3 years and looked at reading specifically. So you might have a school that's an A school, but their trend in reading is going down. And so they're receiving support for reading, versus you might have a school that is a C school and is a tier 3 because of their population, but they are doing great and they have built capacity in their school and they don't need quite so much support because they're on an upward trend. And so we really dug deep into that. If I can speak quickly about the principal data chats. As a past principal who was at a tier 3 school and has done many, many data chats in different ways throughout the years, I truly felt that this was the most useful for principals, the most individualized. When we would go in with our principal lead teams, the chats were only 30 minutes, so you barely had 5 minutes to talk. And so you were going really, really fast, and then everyone who was sitting around the table was trying to quickly, jot down each person's individual support. This was much more individualized. They got full 30 minutes with us, and they also brought their leadership team, which included teachers. And so that piece really empowered, I think, their leadership teams, and then they were really able to see that the process wasn't a gotcha and that we were there to support, which helped to build that trust with our teams.
So big picture wise, you guys go out and have the data chats with the leadership team and then identify which specific areas are the most need. And then that's where the next level of coaching team.
Right, so that's where the content teams then will go in and push and support, whether it's the coordinator or the coaches. They work directly with the teacher in the class and or at their PLC, whatever the need is for that school. And the whole idea is obviously to deepen their knowledge and their instructional practices to really raise the level of rigor, but to also ultimately raise student achievement for our kiddos.
So that second team that goes in, is that at the request of the principal and the leadership team, your suggestion, or just a combination?
It's a combination. So we met last week and I had a whole chart of who asked for what support, but we put their data up and we put our trend up. And so for in some cases they didn't ask for support that we felt they should have asked for. So we followed up and reached out to them and had that team member reach out to them. They copied us. and then I'll wait for them to respond, and if they don't respond in a week, then I'll pick up the phone and call and say, how can we help in this area? We're being like nice but pushy to try to move the needle.
And you
Yes,
guys
we're
are-
being targeted.
I tell you, and we have the nicest people to be nice and do that, so thank you for what you do.
I'm going to let Candace talk a little bit about the next bullet up there, which is Ante Up. So after we had got done with our data chats, then our school leadership teams would go with Ryan Libby, Candace, or Dr. Itzen, or Brian Curls, and they would work on what's called the Ante Up Sheet, which, Candace, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that.
Sure thing. So as we're looking at how to move our district forward to make that we realized schools needed an easier process of progress monitoring and looking at who are those individualized students. So what we came up with is a system that allows them to see who actually showed up to their buildings this school year. A lot of times we set our goals based upon how we ended last school year, but those are not the same students who actually showed up in our schools on August 10th. So we changed our system and we are showing them the data of who actually showed up your buildings on August 10th. And then based upon your progress monitoring data, how are our students progressing? So again, with all those targeted approaches, we're trying to align our systems to move us forward. So we really dug in with them. So when they're looking at their goals are based upon who's there versus how they ended, and then how are those students doing. Each quarter, they'll be able to plug in based upon our progress monitoring, who's moving towards proficiency, and are we moving towards our goal? And if that answer is yes, we're gonna keep those systems moving. If that answer is we need a little more support, then we wrap back around with those content pieces of how can we push forward, but always trying to make it an easier, faster process for them and giving teachers the tools to be able to identify who are those students.
So one of the things I think I've mentioned this before, but just to reinforce, one of the reasons that's so important is because, Lee County, in terms of its population, as a community, we're a very mobile population. We have one of the lowest stability rates in the state of Florida. We are also one of the fastest growing, as you are well aware, and in the area of ELL, we have been the fastest growing for the last 5 years in the state of Florida. So therefore, doing that, where you're looking at this year's kids versus last year's data is critically important, because you're going to see some change over the course of the summer, particularly those schools where you have a high mobility rate.
Thank you. Also, we've added this year, which is new, we've included our elementary assistant principals on a monthly meeting that had never happened before. And the feedback, we've now had 2 meetings with them, and we're getting, is it 3?
I had 2, and our third one is this Monday. Mm-hmm.
So the feedback from the assistant principals has been overwhelmingly supportive. They feel like they really can support teachers in the classroom because they're hearing the same messages that our leading and learning teams are hearing, that the principals are hearing. Now they're hearing that. So when they're in the classrooms and they're observing teachers, they're working with teachers, they're looking at their curriculum maps and instructional guides, they're able to really give support that they have background knowledge of. And so the way that Bethany and her team break it up, they have 3 breakout sessions. One focuses in on ELA and reading, one focuses in on math, one focuses in on science with the coordinators, and they rotate through each of those to make sure that they have all the information they need for what is coming up between now and the next month.
It also gives them an opportunity to speak with their peers. In the past, they haven't had opportunities to speak with their peers on how are you doing intervention in your building, or how is this working in your building. And assistant principals have a huge undertaking with instruction. Yeah. And so it really helps to sharpen their saw to make sure that they're ahead of everything.
What common themes are you hearing among the APCs in terms of just difficulties in delivering academic services?
Time for professional development with their teachers.
Really?
So in elementary, they are tasked with teaching all subject areas. And so it's difficult to keep that focus and keep the professional development for all 3. So in fifth grade teachers are responsible for reading, math, and then science. So how do we ensure that we have time for collaborative planning for each of those subject areas, every week? And so that's what we hear.
They're not divided in...
Not in all schools.
Oh, okay. It's just, how many of our schools do that?
Probably half, maybe less.
Just out of curiosity, is it Does it seem to be working better for those kids or
Depends on the
for
school. You have
for the
some
teachers?
schools-
So they make their own school-based decision on
Yes,
that.
it depends on the school. Some schools that are self-contained and teach all subjects are doing great. Some that departmentalize aren't doing so
So there
great,
is
and some
no-
are. So it really depends on the school.
It is a school-based decision. You know, when I go and do my walks, it's one of the questions I typically raise when I'm in an elementary school in particular, and they do look at their data. I know, you talk to principals, and it's like, well, we tried this way, we saw this trend in 4th and 5th grade, and now this year we're departmentalizing. And it seems to be working better when they look at their data. So it is interesting because it's very, it is very dependent on the population that they're dealing with, and honestly too, I think who you have teaching 4th and 5th grade and what their talent is.
So on one hand, it enables them to specialize, but on the other hand, like reading, moving, moves the needle in other areas. So if they're not having that common planning and talking about how this student is doing and reading, and what could you do in science, say, to support that same strategy, it makes it a little more challenging.
And one other question, because in professional development, one size does not fit all, because you're going to have some of those teachers that are either brand new to teaching and/or taught 1st grade for years, and now they've moved up to 4th. How is that done?
So that was how Leading and Learning came about. So in elementary, you have 3 people going for every team in 4th and 5th.
Okay.
So you have someone coming down for ELA, someone coming down for math, someone coming down for science, and they're able to bring those best practices, those strategies, the rigor of the standard, how to work through the instructional guides. They're able to bring that to their team and then train their team. And
But you're going to have the veteran teachers that have, no?
We're getting at quite a mix, which is nice for us.
Right.
So we said to send someone that you feel is going to have that capacity to have influence in a PLC setting. And so some we have brand new teachers, some we have very veteran teachers, some we have somewhere in between. It's been a nice mix because when they share best practices, we need all different types of learners, but all different types of experience to talk about how to move the needle.
Okay.
it's just the overarching issue of time. Teachers never have enough time. You don't have enough time in your buildings.
Right, and I guess, I'm looking through the lens of a high school teacher. I know, and, at a certain point, when you've taught a certain subject for a million years, the kinds of things that are offered in a PLC to somebody who's pretty much a newbie are things like,
In there.
you're sitting there like that and thinking of the papers you have to grade and that sort of thing. So,
when you asked the question about departmentalizing, though, one of the things that I felt helped our schools this year was the principals and their leadership teams came down and met one-on-one with Denise and Shanna and myself, and we walked through the data and we walked through specific teachers, because sometimes teachers just need to find their niche, right? Sometimes you're teaching math and science and you're not, you like it, but you might not be the best at it, and you're a much better ELA teacher. And so we had those conversations with, this teacher might be a better fit here, or this teacher might be a better fit here. And I actually just recently went to a school where one of those movements were made based off of the data. The teacher moved from 5th to 3rd. Teacher was not happy about it in the beginning, and a couple weeks into the school year went to administration, was like, thank you, I love it here. I would have never asked to move, but this is where I should have been.
that's great.
It really rolls into our last bullet, so I also want to let you know we do cross-divisional meetings on a regular basis as well. So for example, every Wednesday, Academic Services and Human Resources meet. And so when you look at professional development, which falls under Dr. Pruitt and her team, they hear we might need to have some system-wide professional development offered, and then her team reacts to that as well. And we meet weekly to make sure that we're all on the same page and working together. Conversely, we also meet with business services once a week, where we look at any type of budget requests that schools may have, because our executive directors are in schools on such a regular basis. They can advocate or speak a little bit about what the request is from a school, why they might be requesting a fund, and be able to really elaborate for a business services team. So I just want to let you know those are cross-divisional meetings that happen on a weekly basis. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, before we move on to the next, I have a couple of questions going back to the beginning of your presentation. So, for example, tiered school content support. You use data, and I guess that helps you figure out where you're going. But my question is, how do you ascertain that the people who are receiving services or support feel that it's effective? In other words, you're making a decision and you're pushing out. How about the people who are receiving? Do they have an opportunity to evaluate the support received in a formal way and provide feedback to you, or is it anecdotal? Two, the curriculum briefs. Who uses them? How do you know if the right people, the people who need to use them, are using them, or is there's an expectation that everybody participates? And again, who's telling you whether or not these are effective? E-learning walks. When you finish the e-learning walk, is there an outcome that is agreed to by the Learning Walk team, goals for the school, and how is their follow-up? And then, so I guess my question is, I see a lot of proactive work on your part. How do you know, apart from looking at the data 6 months later, that what you've done has had an impact? And how do you know that what that you could have done more or done better in terms of feedback from the recipients?
Sure. So great questions. So the three big areas, we're going to work backwards. So the e-learning walks, we have a common app that we use where we go into classrooms and we actually collect data. And the data is based around, our high-yield instructional strategies, and that's one of the reasons why we can look for trends. And then when we go back and we work with schools, we can say, here's what we've seen now the past 2 visits that are happening. Anybody want to add on that one?
Yeah, if I can add to that one. So one of the things we do is when we're walking those classrooms, we have these look-fors. Administration is walking with us, even teacher leaders are walking with us, and they're looking at the same things. So then when we debrief our conversation, we capture notes through a Google form, and we work through that, and we go, what are we going to provide support, but then look to the admin team and the teacher leaders and say, what did you see, what bubbled up, what support would you also like us to provide? When that meeting ends and the debrief happens, we send that back to the schools. And very similar to like the quarterly data chats that we talked about, we have a system of follow-up and pushing the supports back in. What's really nice with the partnership, going back to human resources, is in the professional development department, they are also part of the e-learning walk team. So they will walk our first year new teachers classrooms. That ties back to what Ms. Vaughn asked, because there are very specific supports we need for our new teachers that are not mirroring what we need for our veteran teachers. And right there, it allows us on the spot to delineate, this is a really good support coming out of professional development, or this is a really good support. We need high-yield instructional strategies specific for our science content, and our science team is going to come back to meet with the PLC, and that allows us to be our ongoing support. When we go back to the school for that follow-up visit or our next walk, we start with, how did those supports work over the last month? And then before we even walk classrooms again, that's that follow-up piece. So we start that cycle, that coaching cycle, all over again.
We do the same with ESOL and ESE. So for our schools that have a high ESOL population, Carlos comes with us, or for ESE, one of the coordinators for ESE comes with us.
We have an internal document that we use that are follow-up for each of our schools that all the executive directors and directors have, and that's part of our weekly meeting, is to look back what have we followed up with, what do we still need to follow up with as well, and we document that for us internally.
Ms. Fisher had a question.
So I'm thinking, may I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is a lot of stuff coming to the principals and APs, a lot of stuff. Is it essentially saying, it's hard, I've not been a teacher, I've not been in a lot of classrooms, so how do they manage all of this information and content that's being driven by different groups with respect to different curricula, whatever.
So that's why they bring their leadership team. So the onus is not just on the principal. He or she empowers people in their building, and everybody has an area that they're responsible for. The push-in support is oftentimes at the request of the school, or certainly at the request of us as well. And that is directly the touch point is with the teacher on that.
Okay.
So the responsibility.
The leadership team includes teacher leaders.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is whoever the principal deems to be part of the leadership team, and everyone we've worked with so far has had teachers on those teams as well. I have not been in a school where it's just been exclusively the administration.
Typically in the debriefs, the leadership team is there. There's teachers sitting at the table with us, and they will have very specific questions because they want to be able to help coach as well. And so they'll ask, like, what strategies did you see this or did you see this? Because it's things that they're focused on, and then they're able to take that feedback as well.
And Mary had a question.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to add to Ms. Morgan's question about professional development. Every participant completes a survey, and in that survey, it asks the question of, did it change your practice? And they need to do that in order to get credit for it, so they have a very strong motivation to complete it. And then those survey results are given back to the trainers or to the division that's providing that. So I just wanted to.
And then we push that to our leaders who provided that training, and then part of the directors of curriculum instruction. When they meet weekly with their coordinators or bi-weekly with their coordinators, they go through that data.
Ms. Fisher, and we need to move on along because 11 o'clock we have an appointment. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I want to thank Mrs. Morgan for those questions, because those were some that I had written down. And just for a little bit of further clarification, for instance, when you do the e-learning walk, and then you do your debrief, and is the classroom teacher, the subject classroom teacher, part of that?
No, we don't. One of the things we do not do is identify teachers by name. It's not in the e-learning walk. The e-learning walk is look for trends in the building and points of opportunity for the school to really make a difference in their building. We wanted to make sure this was not an evaluative tool, and any stretch of the imagination is truly meant to help the school move forward.
We leave a positive note for the teachers when we go into the classrooms, but we do not share which classrooms we went into. We'll say trends for the grade level, but we don't say specific teachers' names.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering then how they give their feedback. Is that through the teacher leaders?
School-based administration, so correct.
And we always start our debrief with best practices we saw in the school, because that's how we're grabbing all the best practices to share across the schools. So we start with our best practices we saw, things that the admin asked us to look for, and then we go through it, and we actually let the schools identify the pieces of opportunities that they saw and how we can support that. So the work is really through the leadership team of the school and wrapping back around of how we can push in supports.
So then how does the individual classroom teacher ask for what they might need? Because you have such a variety of second career people, new people, and then your seasoned teachers. And I hear a lot of feedback from particularly the seasoned teachers, so who maybe indicate that they don't feel like their input is valued or considered or even allowed. So that's just why I was
Part of that input comes through our Leading and Learning. Because we have so many people coming in for Leading and Learning, we often take the trends that we see from the e-learning walks, and we say, as a district, we really need to support this best practice, and then we'll build that into that training. But the teams are able to send back their feedback through that individual.
I'll put my principal hat on too. So my principal hat would be, when you work with each teacher individually at the start of the year, you meet with them and you talk about what is going to be your area of growth this year professionally. And then when you do your classroom walkthrough, you're giving feedback based around what that individual teacher is working on. That is what I'm not saying it's a systemic across the district, but our executive directors certainly have been working on that since the start of the year, that as we look at pushing individual support for students, we also want to push for individual support for our teachers to help them grow where they are and where they want to go at the same time.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that practice is highly effective and really does more directly involve each individual teacher, and it should be systemic, and I know that currently it isn't yet, but,
Right.
but in places where that occurs, I think you see a higher level of success.
And I agree with you. I agree with you. It's definitely a best practice.
We also have a feedback, just if I could throw this in, we also have a feedback form on all of our curriculum maps, instructional guides, things that we push out that teachers are able to send us feedback on, and we respond immediately to their feedback.
And then, Ms. Morgan, in regard to the curriculum briefs, those are available to any teacher that teaches that subject area, the administration as well. And the premise of that is so the administration knows what is happening prior to walking into the class, and then the teachers know, as I'm getting ready to plan for my next lesson, what are the big ideas that I need to know. There's an expectation they use it. Do we have a monitoring device to make sure that it happens? No. It is just provided as another level of support for teachers.
But you're investing time
Yes, ma'am.
and resources in the creation of that, and you have no way of knowing whether or not it's actually having an impact.
You are correct. So we will
And
talk about that as a team.
Observations.
That kind of leads into the question that I have. We heard a lot last school year about the e-walks and all of the things that were going on and the going in and out of the classes and all of that. Has there been a decrease in that? Or is it done just on how is it set up? Are we still going in and out of classrooms as much as we did in the previous school year?
So all of our teams have been through each school twice up to this point already, but we also have more push and support to schools than ever before. That is the one piece we heard definitely during our data chats. For example, Tier 1 schools said, I feel like I'm getting more support this year than I have in the past because it's focused really in on content areas specifically, and that's the difference between that. So moving forward, because I know we have time, I wanted to just share a couple pieces of the puzzle to consider before we get into our progress monitoring data. At the end of last year, remember we're looking at school grades, so grades 3 through 10, when our ELA team finished at the end of last year, they were at 55% proficiency. We're starting with this group of grades 3 through 10. They're at 52% proficiency. That's our start point with this particular group. And when you look at math last year, they ended at 59% proficiency. We are starting with this new cohort at 57% proficiency. So each of those, the start point, we're a little bit behind on that as we move forward.
But that is with your current population.
Right now, that is our current population, grades 3 through 10. I also wanted to share with you our ELL data. So last year at this time, during the first quarter, we had 1,600, almost 1,700 new ELL students. We are up to 2,500 new ELL students, which makes up about 20,000 of our students right now.
So, and just to put this in perspective, I said the fastest growing school district in the state of Florida right now in our ELL population. Prior to last year, our trend data was looking at more like 1,200, 1,300 new ELL students. Last year jumped up to 1,697, and look at what it is this year. So the point here is that I think the challenge for our Lee County School District teachers is greater than it's ever been. You're also dealing with the stability factor I mentioned earlier, and then the poverty factor is the other one of the highest in terms of poverty across the state of Florida. Certainly the only of the top 10 school districts that has a higher poverty rate would be Polk County.
Yes.
Yeah, so these are just, again, challenges that they face.
Ms. Morgan.
One of the things I've heard in the past is that if you come in kindergarten by third grade, if you stay in the district by third grade, you're on track. But if the problem is the people who don't come in. So that tells me that some sort of intervention is needed for those people who come in after kindergarten. Particularly with the English language learners, are we looking at what's being done across the U.S. in terms of segregating out that population and essentially trying to get them to a place where they can effectively mainstream and be part of the peer group, as opposed to teachers constantly struggling with kids who are not where the state expects them to be, where the state tells us they have to be. I just feel like we have to come up with a new strategy, given the fact that our population is changing in such a significant way and growing at the same time.
And we agree with you. As I shared a curriculum advisory the other night, it is our number one greatest challenge is providing support for our teachers and our students in this particular area. And so I had just emailed Evelyn last week and asked her for the national conferences for ELL, because we are interested in seeing some of the best practices that maybe we haven't considered that are out there that we can look at doing things differently. But I also think this goes back to Dr. Atkins, one of his priorities around pre-K and getting those kiddos early so that we're not having this drop in proficiency, and we are able to put in some strategies to help with language acquisition and skills acquisition as we move forward. So we are in the early stages of looking at perhaps some other model to make that happen.
I will say just, that we did look at this recently, and this is prior to Dr. Spiro coming on board, but, one of the things that I was a little, I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but when you look at what is out there and what we are currently doing in our school district at Dunbar High School, at Orange River Elementary, and places like that, those are like kind of cutting edge models. And so we're looking for something, you're always looking for something even better than what you're doing. So, I haven't had a discussion with Evelyn recently since she's been back, but the good news is for us that we do have that going on, which is something that I think has been proven to be successful. But I agree with you, with our changing population, there's a greater need.
Yes.
One of our challenges, but also one of our things that I think we're going to see that's going to improve over the years is we have if you look at the demographic data in Lee County, our demographic data, just to put it bluntly, is the older we get, the more white we are, the less bilingual, less diverse, the older our population is. But when you look at our student population, it's much more diverse. And I think what we're going to see is, as we mature as a community, we're going to become more like Miami-Dade that do have more people available to support our students. So I was in a classroom earlier this week. Lehigh Senior has a teaching academy. And the thing that Jackie Corey pointed out to me, the principal of that building, is that if you look at the kids that are in this particular class, you have kids here that are bilingual, that are even trilingual, right in the classroom. They want to be teachers, counselors, psychologists, right here, at Lehigh Senior, that would like to go up and matriculate back into our system. So that's the good news. The bad news is that we need more of them today.
Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so Dunbar and South both have programs for bilingual students. What does the data show in terms of the effectiveness of those programs?
And East Lee County High School as well. So
Okay,
those are the international centers.
Yeah.
And I do not have the data in front of me that shows, the growth of those students that are in those programs as well, but I definitely can get that for you and then provide that. We are looking at the structure of the International Center and looking at the efficiency of that. That's one of the conversations that Evelyn and I have on an ongoing basis is this really making a difference for our students? Because the students in the International Center are, linguistically are 2 to 3 years, 4 years behind their peers, and it is an extreme challenge for our teachers to help them even bring them close to being on grade level.
Yeah,
And
those are students who come from countries where they have had no basic education. Then my other comment would be, I know I have read, about a school in California, an elementary school in California, dealing with the migrant children, the language problem, the poverty problem. I would think that California and Arizona are faced with the same problems we are. What are they doing? Do they have successful schools? I mean, I realize that what we're doing, we think is leading edge maybe in Florida, but are we really looking carefully at what is being done in other states to address some of these problems? And how we do it at an elementary school versus how we do it at a high school will be very different things. So, anyway,
That's part of our work, and that we acknowledge that what we're doing may not be the most effective way, which is why we brought it up at Curriculum Advisory, which is why this is one of our top priorities. As a Chief Academic Officer, this is one of my top priorities we have, is making sure that we're able to break through that barrier and have some sort of effective model to make a difference, because we all recognize it, and now it's a matter of finding what's out there and then what fits best for our local community.
but because I would say that early learning is not going to address,
Not all of it.
kindergarten readiness is not going to address this problem.
Or
It's-
students that just arrive in high school that.
Exactly, right, and so, okay,
So
I've said enough.
cabinet yesterday, Irma Lancaster is in the room, and I'm not going to put her on the spot, but, you know, she attended her first cabinet meeting yesterday. Well, Irma's from Bakersfield, California.
That's right.
So as she's sitting there listening to us talk about all the issues that we were talking about, of which part of this had to do with our strategic plan and our goals, you know, she was sitting here thinking about what had been going on in her school district back there in Bakersfield and what might be applicable here in ours. So,
Yeah, and Irma and I met yesterday, and we actually touched base on a couple things that they did in their communities regarding addressing ELL and embracing the community in that process. So that was one that she and I were going to be circling back around on.
she's got experience in that area, and as you know, one of our large goals this year, one of mine, we're trying to come up with a better way to frame how I'm describing my 5 highest priorities. But one of them has to do with community engagement, engaging different community agencies to help us with better meeting the needs of our students. So, yeah, I know that she was very much involved in those type of things out in California, and so I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation moving forward.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one more question about this. We're talking about the support of the students.
And teachers.
I can, right, and I'm just wondering, having been a teacher in high school, 11th grade, second half of the year, a brand-new student that doesn't speak, the language, and they're 2 years from graduation, how are we supporting the teachers, excuse me, as far as they have their goals that they have to reach, and now you've got this student, and I know, personally, I would rely on some other student in the class most of the time when I had no other thing to do, and have them help, but then you're, bringing that other student down and not, supporting them. So the support for the teachers.
So Evelyn, has implemented about 5 years now. It's the SIOP model, and which is a lesson plan instruction and also instructional strategies that specifically target students of ELL, but that are also good for all students as well. And so when Dr. Atkins talks about schools that are doing marvelous things with their populations, those are schools that have fully implemented the SIOP model. And Evelyn and her team continue to provide support to schools, and they've increased the number of schools that have asked to have that be part of their professional development, as far as, and also part of their feedback. Evelyn and her team also do push-in support in the classroom with those teachers that really are using the SIOP instructional models.
Also, though, are you placing, in placement of those new students, are they placed not only academically or whatever, but are they placed with a teacher that is proficient or able to handle that type of student entering?
I don't want to speak for all 100 principals, but I would hope that they've worked with their assistant principal for curriculum and making sure that, when certain students come in, that they're strategically placed with some of their best.
Part of our summer work, too, was Evelyn's team worked with our team to build in those SIOP strategies where appropriate into our instructional guides.
And then adding to that, Allison Klein's through Evelyn's department has a model classroom set up at South Fort Myers High School specific to that for our high school students who are coming in that 11th and 12th grade year. What does it look like? How do we best support? So that's been a nice addition this year that was requested from South and is going really well there.
Okay, now we're short on time. Ryan, something you want to do?
Yeah, so real quick, and it's not ELL, but it is about, it speaks to our mobility. So data from the FY17 year, we received, in their first year, kids who took the 10th grade FSA were 25% proficient. If we had them for just 1 year extra, they jumped to 35%. If we have them for 5 years or more, we double their proficiency to 49%. So that speaks that even 1 year in the county, we make a huge impact on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. That was very helpful.
Who's that?
That's Ryan Libby, everybody. He is a genius, Ryan Libby. He was one that worked with all the principals on their Ante Up Sheet as well. So I'm going to go through the data, but I'm not going to read each of the tables to you because we had this ahead of time. So what I want to do is point out a few areas that are concerns for us and what we're doing to address those as we analyze the data. First off, just a reminder, we need 31 points to become an A school district this year. So that's why I put that up there just as a reminder for you. We don't have any data right now to tell us how close we are to that particular goal yet. Our second goal was to increase ELA proficiency. When we looked at the 10 largest school districts in the state of Florida. And high school was an anomaly for us. Now, and remember, this is week 7 and 8 of school. So all this data you're looking at is during the week 7 and 8 of the school year. We're at week 13 right now. So this is what we're going to be looking at. So the area that stood out for us was high school. And why we were most concerned about high school was because 59% of the students that were level 3 have dropped to not being proficient. And so we met as an executive directors and directors of curriculum instruction, and our principal meeting is next week. And one of our target areas is going to be around the area of ELA. And also want to remind you this data was done prior to our one-on-one data chats. And so when we had our one-on-one data chats, this would have been an area when we looked at each school individually that we talked about what are you doing. And every school has a very specific plan now that they have turned into their executive director that we're bringing back to relook at with the current formative data that has taken place as well, and we're going to be engaging in some conversation around that. Candace, anything you want to say about that one?
So our big focus as a curriculum department in secondary and our leading and learning teams and when we're out supporting schools is really aligning the instruction to meet the demands of the standards. A lot of the times, especially as we have level 1s, 2s, and 3s, is sometimes our questioning because as educators, we're nurturers, so we don't want our students to fail, so we lower that question. But then when they're hit with that high-level question, they struggle, and then we give instead of building up. So our focus for really Q2 is how do we probe with that high question, but scaffold up instead of giving. So that's really how we're realigning the systems and looking at it so we're not losing those level 3s, but building them up instead.
Ms. Morgan, and then Ms. Fisher.
Yes, I think it's interesting. The Covey program teaches that you are responsible for setting goals, and you're held accountable for achieving those goals. And it almost sounds like the teacher's psychology works against that by saying, in effect, okay, well, you didn't make your goal, so it's okay. I was sort of expecting that when these kids coming out of the Covey elementary schools got to middle schools, we would see that go away. And yet what I'm hearing is that as you lose connection with the students lose connection with the Covey expectation, they're enabled. Is that a fair?
It is, and it's one of those pieces that we're looking at. So going back to all the systems that we're trying to align, drilling into the students.
Right.
So having those conversations and with the teachers, who are those students? And we took that week at the beginning, and we've seen a huge increase in the relationships between our teachers and students. So really changing the conversation of how do we support so you can do it. So I provide you those supports without giving them to you.
So one of our pushes in the secondary area is really looking at each student individually. Elementary, one of the reasons they had such a large gain last year is because they really tailored, teachers did, to each individual kid and kept looking at it, changing instruction, making adjustments. Eastleigh County High School, when you talk to Ms. Robery, she'll tell you their secret last year was digging into each individual kid. So Clayton Simmons, Linda Mayer, Lori and Candace, we're working, our principal meetings and assistant principal meetings are about how do we create systems inside of the secondary classrooms to really dig down to each student individually to provide them what they need and what's the individual intervention we're helping them if they're deficient in those skills. And that's an art, that's the art of teaching, but that's also the work that we're doing at that level.
You know, one of the things, if you're looking at the middle school level as an example, you know, I find that the rigor piece is something that we aren't as strong as we should, probably at the middle school level. And I think that when as kids grow and you start to get more of these behaviors that creep in, you know, as adolescence comes on board, then you get more of a compliance model that takes in, you know, comes in consideration. And then what a teacher will do is, you know, they will answer or respond to a question instead of putting the kid, you know, making the kids work for that response. So I do think that with our focus, you know, being able to split out the executive directors and have 4 and have somebody focused literally on high school, literally on middle school separately is going to really help in those, with that increase in rigor that I definitely know we need at the middle school level.
I remember Ms. Mayer just joined our team a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Ms. Fisher, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, this data is actually people who were proficient at a level 3 or better and who are not now.
Our analysis of the data, that's one of our key indicators was 59% of our level 3 students who were proficient are now not
I
proficient.
just wanted to clarify that, so
Yes.
that there was not new student.
No, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Vaughn.
I'd be curious to see the difference between, excuse me, the students who enter high school from a middle school where they were good students in like a pre-IB or a pre-AP versus, and this, like, my granddaughter was an excellent student in middle school, but her school didn't offer the pre-AP, ACE, any of that. And so when she hit high school, it was like an awakening because she didn't, you know, she was used to doing really well in her honors classes, but she hadn't had the...
Right, and that's literally what Dr. Atkins has told me from day one is, you know, the level of rigor in our middle schools has to increase, and that is...
Where are we with that in terms of putting it, because we only have a handful of middle schools that offer the pre-ACE, pre-advanced classes, right?
And though a class may be honors and maybe a class may be, you know, pre-ACE, it doesn't necessitate that the other classes aren't providing rigorous instruction. That should, and it's the level of rigor obviously varies depending upon the students that are in front of you. And I'm gonna let Ms. Mayer, if she'd like to come up and talk a little bit about the rigor that she's experienced in the middle schools now that she's been to every middle
Schools, though,
school.
with, let's say they have a pre-ACE, they also probably have honors classes too. And I can tell you that honors is like regular level with a little more, slightly more. It's not the kinds of things that,
So for example, more homework is not more, does not mean it's rigorous.
well, and what I used to see in high school was sometimes a little more motivated students that didn't mind a little more work. But having taught the advanced classes for so many years, there are curricula that you have to do as part of those things.
Absolutely, in high school, especially when you're in the Cambridge program
You have
or
to-
IB, it's
yeah,
very,
you have to
it's
get
syllabus driven.
your syllabus approved by that, by ACE or AP.
We've really been working on looking at the standard. What we found when we've been walking around buildings, and I was surprised to see this, but we're going to work on it, continue and improve in it, is the teachers were not teaching to the level of the standard. And so breaking it down, the no's and the do's and what they really have to do at a level 3, that's where the standard's at. So if we're below that constantly, because our students are below it, so we're having to support them, scaffold up, but we've got to get to that standard. So when that happens, I think we'll see a big change, and we have awesome trainers that are going out. They're assigned to each school. They're going over the high yield strategies. Cassidy Kay does a beautiful job. She came out to my school last year for 5 different trainings on high yield strategies. Rigors included in that, higher order thinking, distributive summarizing. So we're embedding that in all of our schools. They're in our instructional guides now. They were last year, but they're even more embedded into them. So all of those things are going to help us with our level of rigor.
Okay, and I only taught ACE 1 year, but I taught AP for many years, and in a different school district where we had the pre-AP in 7th and 8th grade. And a prerequisite for teachers, I wasn't allowed to teach AP until I had gone to a week-long college board training. And that's where you really, because you mix with those teachers, I mean, no offense to people that come into the schools, but I think that's where the rigor comes in. And I think I'd be interested to see if there's a drop-off, more of a drop-off with students who did well, let's say in 8th grade ELA honors, versus students who had a pre-advanced class.
As they transition to high school.
As they transition, because I see that it's really a jump that they have to take.
One of the things we did look at, because we did question some of those pieces as well, is this a district problem, and we really need to take a deeper look into our curriculum, our instructional guides, and put out, or is this in isolation? And what we found is that it's across the board at all of our high schools. All 14 high schools with our level 3s, we're seeing a regression right now. So for us, it's a systems problem. We need to look internally and really reevaluate what we're doing in Q2, which is why we've shifted our focus to diving into, just like Ms. Mayer was saying, that standard at that level 3, that appropriate supports that is going to push that student. Because even at Mariner High School, who is one of our top successes right now at Q1 data, even their ELA with their level 3s has fallen backwards. So for us, it's a systems piece that we are now working on in Q2, and we are committed to, we're gonna push in as a team, really focus in how can we better support so we keep moving in the right direction.
But that's the beauty of being able to analyze the data, right? So that's why we do progress monitoring, so we can say, stop, pause, let's reset. And Cindy keeps kicking me, so I'm gonna move along.
And I'm Cindy.
Okay, so I'm gonna highlight a few areas. I'm gonna let Candace talk about this just briefly, Candace. You know, an area of focus around math and proficiencies in the area of algebra.
So in algebra, as you guys have heard us talk about previously with our middle school acceleration, is that providing students greater opportunity at middle schools to be able to take higher level math there. So in high school previously, our level 1 and 2 students were taking a liberal arts math progression before they entered algebra. Based upon research and everything that's out there, that's not the best progression for them to open the doors they need to be successful in their careers. So we have shifted back this year to more of our students taking algebra as a 9th grade. So right now, our 9th grade algebra cohort, 15% of them are level 1 students, whereas last year 5% of them were level 1 students. So again, we've worked hard with the secondary math team and our teachers and at the data chats of we need to embed more pieces that allow the students to have hands-on opportunities with the mathematics, because they're not ready for just procedural. That's not going to help close the gaps that they have. So that's our area of focus this year. So again, looking at the numbers, we know the why, but we know the long term, it's in the best interest of our students that we get them on a better math path to be successful later on in life.
Thank you, Candace. And we provided for you just some notable schools that have made a jump in their proficiency in the area of math, and I'll let you look at those individually. And then when we look at the Goal 4 is around the school grade components, and so that gives you a sense of where are we right now in the area of school grade. I want to point out science for 5th grade. So remember, this was before our data chats, and the one commonality that we heard in our elementary schools, and Shannon, Dr. Carlin did a great job with this. We've had a lot of conversations with our principals about 5th grade science and whether or not, or what is their process of spiraling back in 3rd and 4th grade standards, which is 50% of the science test for elementary are the 3rd and 4th grade standards, and then your 5th grade standards. And so what are you doing inside of your building to spiral back and reteach those standards? What intervention time are you using for that? And then is there fidelity with the science block? Is reading creeping into it? Is math creeping into it? So what are you doing as a principal to make sure that you are making sure that the science block is truly there for science? And so we're really looking to see a big jump in that area, because that is on the radar. At our principal meeting next week, the very first topic of conversation is science, our big opportunity. That's what it's called. And we are going to be looking at the formative data. And
we also hired, well, hopefully it
go ahead.
Comes to the board on Tuesday, a science coordinator for elementary.
So pending board approval.
Before we were a team of one. So hopefully we'll be a team of two.
And then I provided for you just some notable increases. These are schools that have had increases in all the school grade components that I just shared with you. And there are a couple. I'll point out G. Weaver Hips. G. Weaver has been doing some great things in their school. I mean, you see they're up 49 percentage points, and they were in some other categories as well. They're working hard in that building. And then here's an area we are extremely proud of. In the area of ELA and math, these are the achievement gaps between students. This is ELA. Remember, you want the bar graphs, those numbers to get smaller. And so if you look across the board, that is extremely promising for us. And as I move to the next slide in math, you're going to see the same trend as well. So we are definitely making progress based around our current data about reducing the achievement gaps. And then our final goal was goal 7, which is to increase the percentage of students who perceive there's an adult that cares about them. This was the best part of this whole presentation, because we actually had to narrow it down. There are so many great things happening in schools to take care of the whole child. And we just wanted to share with you, capture a few of those pieces. The first one was from South High, and if anyone's been out to South High to see what Mr. Matthews is doing, I think all of you at this point, with the bar system, and I stole his graphic from social media. That's his first quarter, and this came from the Bar Institute itself. This is their data, and that shows you the decrease in 9th and 10th grade failures. I've been at the school, I've been there when the bar system has done the coaching with the teachers, and they literally, again, look at individual kids, one by one by one, and that's the secret. Capturing kids' hearts was a big piece that Melissa Robery put in place before they did anything academically. Our AVID schools continue to grow. We're at 19, as well as Leader and Me. And then what I saw on social media, and I do a lot on social media, I see a lot with the young men and young ladies and the connections they're having with high schools and middle schools and elementary schools and what they're doing together. That is a trend that really it's very nice to see, because it's making a connection for students, for their siblings who may be at different levels as well. Boss?
Well, just I want to highlight, the work of Crystal and Jarrett, when it comes to starting these programs at some of our schools. That goes often unnoticed. But it is critically important. The Diversity and Inclusion Department has an impact, I think, a very, very positive impact on students. So it's not just about training teachers, but it's also impacting our kids directly.
A little love to Crystal and Jared.
That's right. You're going to see Crystal and hopefully at 11 o'clock.
We're getting there, boss.
Note what she's wearing today.
We will note. And then the next slide I wanted to point out to you, for example, Fort Myers Middle School has this clothes boutique, and that's what you see there. We have schools buying washers and dryers for their families now to make sure that they could take care of their family needs. Teen Trendsetters that Lori has run for years. Unified Sports, which is through the Special Olympics. And then because it's Halloween, a lot of our schools did trunk or treats. So you want to make, and that's a way to engage community members into their school in a very safe environment. And then Check and Connect through Shelley Taylor. And that's a mentoring program that engages the school with the community to mentor students. 5 of our high schools have destination graduation, which ties in beautifully with AVID. And then we're seeing a collaboration with our community in the creation of sensory rooms. And I put that sandwich board up there because a lot in our schools, you're going to see a lot different this year if you're in schools looking at attendance. Come early during parent pickup. You'll see that says, thanks for being on time. They'll flip it over and says, you're late. And come to the front office, where typically schools have an administrator there meeting with parents during the first half hour after the school bell has rung to talk about the importance of getting to school on time. And so the ABC conversations are important. And then the last slide is for you, for anybody that would like to share a member update.
And we had specifically, I'd sent emails so that you wouldn't be surprised. So Mrs. Fisher and Mrs. Giovanelli were asked to share today, and Ms. Giovanelli will make sure that she receives an opportunity at a future workshop. Also this morning, I sent you a draft schedule for the next 4 workshops around the strategic plan with the board member updates beside that, so that you'll know when you're coming up. Okay, thank you. Ms. Fisher.
So this has been really exciting, and I've been able to step it up on some of the activities that I've been involved in the community as the social emotional learning / mental health liaison. The first thing I want to do is to thank Lori Brooks for the tremendous work that she and her team have done to carry forward the collaboration with the community resources and also to keep us in compliance with the recent state requirements. The mental health page on our district website is second to none.
Agreed.
So the first thing I had was I have been in contact with South Fort Myers High School, and I attended some of the training preschool, and then the other day I spent a few hours out there and attended a team meeting, the teacher update on the student-to-student progress, and then went to a social emotional learning class. And so it's, Angela, it's all about the relationships, and that's why they have that data. I mean, I think a 42% decrease in failure rate at the ninth grade level is amazing. I mean, it is amazing. So, and I think that we are in a time where our kids are traumatized, are going through all kinds of adjustment things, not to mention those who are coming from other countries. I got to see at Horns Marsh and a couple of other places I went where there was a lot of peer collaboration with English language learners. So I talked to two boys, actually at Horns Marsh, who were from Brazil. One has been here longer, so he was just translating and helping, and the student who was here a shorter period of time was still able to complete his assignments and tasks with that help. So I think that peer collaboration piece is another really important piece, and I think that for teachers to be open to allow that, because it's a little extra, distraction, but not really to the kids. They just all kept going and doing what they were doing. I'm just going to back up, because when we talked about the English language learner thing, there's that social emotional component to that too. So a long time ago, when I worked at Hancock Creek Elementary, we had an immersion class. So kids who came to us who were monolingual went to a certain teacher and stayed with her weeks, maybe sometimes up to 2 months, until they were ready to mainstream. And some of them had never even been at a school before or even seen buildings like we have here. So that was a really important piece, and they did just some basic things, learning hygiene and learning the terms for food and what some of the cultural implications were. And it was a highly successful program. We also included home visits with our teachers in that, and I know that this is a different day, and so, but that concept, I think, is something that maybe we could look at. So I live in Cape Coral, and Cape Coral Police Department has been a wonderful partner, along with the Drug Free Coalition, and they have had a class called Help Educate Loving Parents, and they did a heroin and opioid prevention event for the community, and then we were involved with, they partnered with us in the STOP grant. The Drug Free Coalition continues. We had our Red Ribbon recognition the other night, and we were able to recognize kids who stayed drug-free and succeeded academically, athletically, and artistically. So this morning, as we speak, they're doing work on the community needs assessment, which talks about all of these things that are connected with the social emotional learning and the risk factors for sexually transmitted diseases, for substance abuse, and suicide. So when we met with our legislators at Horns Marsh, Leisha Roy was able to share some statistics, and I think, people are like, wow, I had no idea about that. But when we think about the fact that in a 9-month period of time, our Golisano Children's Hospital Pediatric Intensive Care Unit took in over 2,600 kids between the ages of 8 and 17 with either suicide attempts or drug overdoses. Houston, we have a problem. So I'm happy to see, and I thank the schools that are doing some of these social emotional programs, and I want to thank you guys for doing the evaluation of the issues, and then providing those supports. I'm honored to serve on the Florida Gulf Coast Counselor Advisory Board and the FSW Social and Human Services Award, and they're all talking a lot about these issues and how we can collaborate to help to make it better for this community. The Healthy Lee Behavior Task Force is working on the same thing, and so it seems to me like wherever I'm going, there's more collaboration, there's more awareness, and people are looking to work together to see how we can make improvements. I'm on the Girls Coordinating Council of Lee County with Kathy Smith, the public defender, and Amira Fox, and some other leaders in the community. And although they're gender specific with their goals, it is the same thing. It's to keep kids safe and healthy and to reduce the risk of drug abuse and suicide. I've been invited to the state school board, LGBTQ advisory board. Have not been to the first conference meeting yet, but that is coming up in 2 weeks. I continue to advocate for comprehensive health education. I hope sometime we'll have a health education coordinator, because mental health and social emotional health are all part of that. It's already stated in the statutes. There is a curriculum, and good mental health is the foundation for what we're looking at. Dr. Spiro, you said that all academic efforts are all about attendance, behavior, and classroom success. And so with the increase in attention to Goal 7 and building relationships with kids and making them feel safe and part of the program, I think that we're making a lot of progress. We do have existing collaborations with Salis Care, Hanley Center, and then the MOU that Lori mentioned regarding FGCU counselor interns. And I think we will be briefed in December regarding the Florida rules and statutes on mental health, substance abuse, and trafficking. So we have been mandated by the state now to do that. That's all, could be all part of our ongoing comprehensive health education, and yes, I am lobbying you guys. But, so in all of this, and in talking to people at the schools and at some of the community meetings, I have just a couple of concerns that I wanted to share with you. And so we have a skyrocketing mental health need, just challenges that students are facing, trauma, abuse, substance abuse, opioid defects, and the trafficking is part of what our challenge is. And so I think that we got to have kids ready to learn before we can implement, our academic strategies. And I know that has to be done concurrently. I'm a little bit concerned about our mental health and threat assessment teams. I communicate a lot with people who are mandated by state law to be on those teams. So our mental health teams is to be the school counselor, the school social worker, psychologist, and nurse. Our student services, what I used to call, the hub of the wheel. And our threat assessment teams, administrator, SRO, mental health professionals. So that, there's what we say there is, and then there's the reality. So what I'm hearing from some of my former colleagues is that that's not exactly what's happening at the schools, and it really needs to be. So I'm concerned about the appropriate use of school counselors at the elementary level. You heard Ms. Brooks explain what the expectation is of our mental health professional on site, and it's very difficult for them to do that when they're being used as substitute teachers and when they are having lunch and hall duty, because lunch and hall duty is a time when they could access kids who are in crisis, and if they're not in their offices to be able to do that, then that's another issue. And that takes us out of compliance, and I think it puts us in a liability situation, so I want us to be aware of that. And I think what we need to do is to help our, our school-based staff and administrators. They need to know, and they need to understand about the compliance requirements and the potential liability and, the detriment to the students if this is not being done.
Ms. Fisher, can I respond to that?
Please.
So Ms. Brooks met with myself and the executive directors regarding exactly your concern about the mental health teams and the threat assessment teams and who's on there. We have re-educated our principals as to who's on those teams. Additionally, we talked specifically about elementary school counselors and making sure that what you just outlined was not happening in schools, and if they were, we wanted to know the specific schools where that was happening so that that could be addressed personally with the principals, because we are 100% in agreement with you on that. That should not be happening. In regards to comprehensive health education, I'm 100% in support of that. I think you're going to be very pleased when we look at our K12 plan, our first rollout. It's just a first rollout. I believe that we have a duty to making sure that we're preparing our students for what is happening in society, and we need to make sure that we are embedding that through a K-12 system. So that is a piece of work that I'm very proud of, that Lori and Leisha and Mary Lynn have been working with our principal leads. Our principal leads all have that information, and we are rolling that out as we move forward, and the board will get briefed on it.
Awesome. That's great.
And I hate to interrupt. We do have an engagement at 11.
What is it?
To go to the presentation.
So if I could just
for
finish,
staff.
then I have like a couple more sentences.
That's
Okay, so there are a couple of school-based programs that are available to this district at no cost. They're grant-funded. And they are reporting back that they are having difficulty implementing their programs in the schools because of scheduling conflicts, et cetera. One is Learning for Life, which is funded to us through a state grant. And the other one is the Hanley Center Prevention Programs, which provide Teen Intervene, Project Success, and Parenting Wisely in schools. And I think you had
We did.
a site at Cape.
We did.
And so they had a $450,000 grant from the Behavioral Center of Central Florida, and they chose to use it in Lee County. And of course, about grants, you have to be able to report that you have used that money. So I think that maybe we need to look at how we're allowing them the opportunity to provide those services to the kids who really need it. And so, there's a big community impact. Society is difficult right now. And I think yesterday at our legislative delegation presentation, we heard other pieces of the governmental agencies saying the same things. So I hope that we will continue to be able to educate ourselves and others, and to be able to collaborate with our community to make it a better place for the kids. Thank you.
And thank you for the time to be able to sit with you this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we didn't take a break, so if we can take our break now, and Superintendent, you want to tell them what we're...
Well, we have our Sunshine Committee, and it is Halloween. So they are doing something down in the atrium at this point. There are some of the departments that entered costume contests, so I think they're going to get started at 11, and then we do have LCDC, which is kind of the Lee County cover band that I think is down there providing entertainment. There's also refreshments, and I just thought, since this is going on in the building, it might be an opportunity for the board just to go out and be seen. I know that maybe we won't take a lot of time, just 5-10 minutes or something like that. If you'd like, you don't have to do that, but
Refreshments.
I think you'll be impressed with academic services down there.
Since we didn't take a break, that was 10 minutes, so be back at 20 after, or 15, 20 after. Thank you.
and my, the older one, well, they're younger than me,
We're ready, go on.
never.
Okay.
Hasn't talked about it all these years
She's
until
around.
just recently.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it was her-
But you
Okay,
would see.
welcome back, ladies. We have to get started now. Okay, sorry. So, happy Halloween. Okay, enough of that. I was speaking to someone in the hall. Yeah. I don't know. All right, thank you so much, and thank you to the staff. You'll see this later. Great costumes, great event, and thank you to our Sunshine Committee. The next thing, okay, we have until 12. I'll just lay out what we're doing. We have until 12 o'clock. We have, Ms. Giovanelli has a report, and also we have to discuss the attorney's legal services, and then we would have one item kind of go to the order that we need to do. So we need to govern ourselves accordingly and go kind of fast.
I can be fast.
Okay, Ms. Giovanelli, you want to go
Try
ahead?
not to talk so fast, but I can't help it
Okay.
sometimes. Okay, so I met with Kaylee just this week regarding the SOS program, and she's still waiting on a flyer that she anticipates to be completed by sometime in December. They've been working on that with Giardi's department and Crystal. So her and I are going to meet back up, and we're scheduling a meeting with the Horizon Council, the president of the Horizon Council, which I had spoke to him when I filled in for you a month or so ago, and so they want to, talk about that and explore that further and see if they can assist us and how we can reach out to all the businesses in the community, because I think that's really valuable, because we need their support. We want to open up, start the new SOS program in Lehigh, so that is a little bit challenging because there's not a lot of businesses out there. So we're still going to rely on most of our businesses in Lee County or in town to support that. So they're still determining where that's even going to be, what where they're going to actually have the program, what school, or over the summer. So that's still up in the air and for discussion. Really, that's all I have. Actually, Dr. Atkins sent me something this morning. He is wanting to get with other partner with other organizations regarding the SOS program. So him and I, we're going to talk about that, apparently, since some new things that have arrived on that. So that's all. I don't really have a lot, but it's a work in progress. And so if anyone's out there talking to any business leaders, once I get the flyers, I want everybody to have one in their back pocket so they can pull it out and give it, because it's going to take all 7 of us to keep that ball rolling.
And can we put it on Facebook and things like that?
Oh, I'm sure that will happen.
Yeah, I haven't talked to the Lehigh Chamber.
And can you remind us of your strategic plan area?
I don't even remember.
Oh,
Mine's
okay.
with,
It was partnerships.
yeah, I was gonna say partnerships with businesses and so forth. Yeah, thank you, because I'm like, just what I
work
do.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Well, and she's working on extended programs through
Right, those extended partnerships, yes.
A new little element of it that,
Yes, extended day, extended year, and involving things like the SOS with partnerships within the community. And Mrs. Jordan also has a different partnerships, which is with the business partnerships, and we'll be hearing from her next workshop.
right, well, and so that's, in my email, I was just reading it, because so I will also be in charge of like the after-school and before-school programs, and so he's gonna get with me. This is a whole new conversation, so I'm gonna learn all about that soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to add that on. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just heard Ms. Fisher say something about chambers. It seems to me that we have a responsibility to educate. Horizon Council is not, unless they're going to do an education program with their membership. We've got to be talking to the chambers, BIA, CCIA, some of these others, about what we're doing, so.
But I think what Melissa was saying is correct, because I know I carry those folders with me as well. So anytime I'm speaking for one thing, dealing with the district, I always have that and give it to them for sponsorships. So collectively, we all, I mean.
But I don't have it.
Have to participate. They're coming up with new ones. I have
The new one's still, it should be done in December.
Yeah.
I gave my last old one out like a day or two ago. I don't have any more, so, and I don't know that Kaylee even does, because they're revising it and updating it with the new data and stuff from this past summer. So it's a work in progress a little bit.
And the reason I had it, because I was, I had it from the past because of EDAC and working with that SOS at that time. So I just, it's always in my car, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and we look forward to the other reports, and thank you for organizing this and getting us all on track.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity for people to really talk about the work that's going on. So November 17th, I believe, is the next workshop. You'll hear from Dr. Spiro and some different members of his team at that point, and they're going to be talking about kindergarten readiness and also about the career and college initiative. So we'll hear from Mrs. Morgan as her area is around kindergarten, and from Mrs. Jordan at that time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to our school board attorney legal services. We are at this point at the end. I think today is the end of our initial, I think it was 6-month agreement with our attorney. And so we need to talk about moving forward. I know, excuse me, I know that Mr. Bierman had mentioned month to month, or we needed to decide if we're going to, while we're doing that, which we are going to have to at this point because we can't just end it. And we need to really decide what we're going to do going forward. So would you?
Sure. As you recall, we were engaged in April to take over when the prior school board attorney resigned or retired. And we've been here since. We work on an hourly basis. We've been handling, I think, everything that he handled and substantially more because we have the broad abilities to do that. We have 70 lawyers with specialties in every area of public sector representation. So we had proposed to you that we could remain on as your permanent school board attorney, if that's your choice. We proposed an flat fee, an annual fee, and we're willing to do that. Even if you want to go on a month-to-month basis until you decide, we could live with the hourly fee with the exclusions that we provided. However, if you really don't intend to continue for the full year, it would be probably fairer on both sides to continue with the hourly. But, either way, we're here and, available to assist in whatever way the school board desires.
Okay, comments from board members? Discussion.
So, Mr. Bierman, could you just reiterate then the annual cost?
Yes. Well, the annual flat fee would be $450,000. We'd want to be paid monthly or quarterly would be fine, but and divide it up. We provided certain exclusions. Those would be litigation or dispute resolution, appeals, anything in court or an administrative hearing. We excluded public finance work, bond work, which typically is paid out of the proceeds of a bond issue.
Right.
We excluded large asset transactions in which the fees are paid at closing, and then any matter in which the fees are paid by a third party, and that would be, for example, an eminent domain, which is where you're condemning property. I had been asked to clarify when would a third party pay the fees, and what we're seeing now throughout the public sector is that private sector comes in and offers to take over some or provide some service, and you want to have that evaluated. And you tell them, we'll evaluate it, but you have to pay our costs in evaluating it. That would be an example of where a third party pays the fees.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm essentially for doing it on a monthly basis because I don't think we've done an appropriate cost analysis across our legal services to make a decision long-term. I'm not opposed to an annual contract. I just don't think I'm in a position to agree to an annual contract without a better understanding of how our costs are being distributed across the legal team that we're putting in-house. So it's my intent to speak with Angela and Brian Williams, of Angela Pruitt and Brian Williams, about doing some sort of cost analysis that will create a context for this conversation as we move forward.
And just to add, and the reason I stepped away for just a moment was just to confirm with Ms. Schaefer that I believe Dr. Pruitt and Mr. Williams are planning to come before the board November 14th. And one of the things that Dr. Desmores has been involved in doing actually since really June, I think you brought this up in June, is obtaining information from different districts. Now, it's been very, very difficult. They just don't hand it over, so she's ended up doing public records requests to get information from them relative to their legal services costs. So our hope is to at least present that information to the board at that date and give you an opportunity to make an informed decision.
And my response to that would be, I'm not sure that we need to collect a lot of district information. We know what our costs have been. We know what our services provided have been internally. I think we can do it just looking internally at what the jobs are and, how we're allocating, what we're paying for them, and, historically, what our costs have been, and building in a cost increments going forward, increases going forward.
And I agree with that in that, with new attorneys coming on to help Mr. Williams, the new positions, it's kind of like where we were 6 months ago, and let's see how this all fits into place. And giving it a little time to, or maybe with their presentation, they'll be able to clarify that this will be off of this plate and put on this plate, this person will be doing this, and also kind of giving us an overview, just basic, that if we have one organization, one firm doing what we would have to subcontract out, that I think is where we're looking at our difference as well. The fact that we don't have to take the time to look for a subcontract attorney to do this particular case because we don't have that in-house. I think they've proven that that is something that goes smoothly with a full attorney firm. Yes, ma'am.
So then I was thinking, if I could visually see like a cost and service comparison with consideration to the growth and either the increase or decrease in litigations and the need for external services. So, I mean, we had a situation before where we had two attorneys. One was the staff attorney, one was the board attorney. And I want to see, like, what's the cost specific to the board attorney's responsibilities and potential need to cover. I mean, I feel like in the 6 months we've been able to ascertain that that this Rice Sirota is able to meet our needs, and so I don't know how much has that saved us in external costs, and really, and then the delineation between what the staff attorney's needs and responsibilities are, and those specific to the board. So that, I mean, if I could just see a visual, that would help me a lot.
We all do.
Right.
I want to throw in there, it can be difficult to quantify. There were a number of things that came up when we came on board and that have continued through the last several months, where it's my understanding that you had a single person, right. That person had 24 hours in a day, of which most people only work 8 or 9 or 10 hours in that day. And so you had enough time to do a certain amount of things, but not enough time to do all of the things that we do with using numerous people with very specific skills.
Yes.
And so to the extent that you say, well, we had one person, we were paying, we were spending $200,000, now we have a team and we're spending, $450,000, it's just a different model of services.
Right.
And some of the things that you're talking about were not being outsourced, they just weren't done in the same way or with the same level, at the same depth. And so when where I see the value added, honestly, is in things like very thorough reviews of, and thorough work on, a FEMA response,
Right.
or a response to the Department of Education, or a contract review in which we see that, a vendor submitted a contract for us to look at, and that vendor had many very vendor-side things. It doesn't necessarily result in savings immediately. What it results in is a greater level of protection over time, so that if that contract goes south, you have built in the protections that you should have. And so that's where I see the value added, but it doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily present immediately. It's over
And I agree
time.
with that. I think we were aware that we needed enhanced services for sure, that we did not have what we really needed, considering the size of this district and the current times. So, yes, and I think that's a huge advantage, is that you have that skill set, variety of skill sets available to you without having to search and contract out. So, and if we paid a salary plus benefits plus external contracts, we were paying, enough anyway. So, without that level of protection. So, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I would just agree. Value has definitely been added, and we're clearly deficiencies. So it's not looking at where we were and looking to come up with the same cost.
No.
It's really a matter of, what does our new legal department look like? Who's doing what? And does the contract for the school board attorney reflect a need given that particular new model for
Yes,
legal services in Lee County?
Yes,
I agree with most of what was said, but I have to add that, frankly, I'm disappointed that we have moved so slowly on this. We've been talking, and granted, when Mr. Dodig left, we didn't have a lot of time to make, there was a time restraint, so we had to move. But in the meantime, we've gone through a 6-month contract, and I don't see us as having advanced all that much in terms of what exactly, we've gotten some information, but what exactly will the new legal department look like? And certainly that's a consideration with everything else that was said here. And the other thing I would add, and it's about attorneys, I think we need to also, when we're looking at this, we need to look at the overall in the district on the attorneys. I'm curious on how much we have expended with like Franklin Henderson and the various cases. We've spent on one case alone probably $150,000, and are we really, as a district, doing this in the most efficient way? And we need all of those pieces to do a really good cost analysis, and we do need to do that, but we need the pieces on both sides, I think.
Well, I just think that, I'm with you, Betsy. I know that we used to see 2 people, so those 2 individuals were here, so that's who you've seen. The behind the scenes, we have no idea how many attorneys what that looks like, where they have everything kind of like together. And so if we could get, I know that Mr. Williams is building up his team, or the district is building up the team, but if we could actually get, like you said, who's going to be doing what? Those parts.
Sorry, I
And then that way we can, you couldn't hear me? Let me see. But if we could actually get those bodies, those pieces, and then that way we know what we have for our attorneys. And I think that would make it a lot easier because of the fact that we have those numbers and the bodies, not just those two individuals that we're so used to seeing.
Again, I think the 14th is going to answer a
Yes.
lot of these questions.
And Ms. Giovanelli?
So, yeah, because we're still going to have to outsource legal. You know, so legal, just like Ms. Vaughn was just saying. So I think we need to see what's going to be outsourced, what always, because I don't think that's going to change, and then what the new attorneys are. That was, you know, what Gwen had brought up. I was thinking the same thing, that we need to know, you know, what the cost savings is going to be in those new positions. I think that's going to be a savings. So, but we need to see the value in that. We knew it was important, but we really don't have the numbers to back up everything that we kind of think we know. You know, we know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. You know what I mean? So we have to know. That's all.
And I think, as the superintendent said, on the 14th, we'll get more information about
Yes.
Mr. Williams' side of the house. And also, I think one of the important things that Mr. Bierman brought up was the protection. And I know that, for example, in the area of contracts, they've done a lot of work on updating our contracts and helping us to get there. And it is kind of that ethereal that we're going to save in the long run. And the more we tighten up our legal, you know, department and systems, then going forward we can save, because perhaps there won't be as much, you know, litigation, and how, you know, just by the way we do things differently. So I think the question on the table, for the most part, is do we go month to month? Do we want to say that will be for, you know, approximate number of months so that they will be, yes.
I think, like Ms. Vaughn has said, we have to do something. We have been sitting on this forever. So if they come on the 14th and give us the explanation, we need to be ready by December to make this happen by the end of the year, whatever that may be.
So then we're looking at, and like I said, we're looking at extending for at least 2 months until the end of the year, and add to that, I'll get to you in 1 second, that Dr. Pruitt had mentioned, if we do look to go in a different direction, that is going to take us several months to make sure. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So if we do at least until December, at least they know they have until December, but we'll go from there. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Ms. Morgan, you were first, and then...
Yeah, I was just going to say we ought to do 6 months, because regardless of what we find out in November, we're still going to have, it's going to take time if we decide to go with a board attorney, and if not, you know, we're going with a firm, we're going to have to decide what we're going to do about a firm. So I think we should, and it's only, I don't think it's fair to them to give them a 2-month, you know, contract. I think it should be at least 6 months.
Well, could we say 6 months and then, but have some kind of ideal by the end of this year?
I don't think, yes,
No,
absolutely.
we will have a decision on what we're going to do.
That's the problem. We cannot decide when to move.
No,
So
we
need to
will.
move.
And I think part of that, the length of time and the hesitation has been making sure what the other departments are going to do, and that piece of the puzzle has not actually fit in there, and we'll get that coming forward.
So
Yes,
I don't, and I may be wrong, and correct me if I am, Dr. Atkins, but I don't know that that is even the issue. I mean, there's always some overlap of services, but the staff side is not, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about hiring a school board attorney. And so when we look at things like updating policies, and I mean, they have the expertise in-house, which would eliminate, from the information I have received till now, the need to outsource, because you are going to charge us an annual fee and handle X, Y, and Z, whatever's going to be in your contract, with the exceptions that you mentioned here.
That's correct.
So I think that we need to make a decision about our school board attorney. And if we can do that after receiving that other information, if it helps people. Yeah, you know, I think that when I said services and cost comparisons, I really meant specific to the board. And then what it, you know, and you've already let us know what it is, the services that you can provide.
So
So we have,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
basically have most of the information we need, and I would go along with Mrs. Morgan's recommendation that we
For 6
do a
months,
6-month contract now,
with-
and then before the end of the year.
we would have a
Final decision
definitive,
after we
because
hear
that
the
would give
information
them
on the
some
14th.
security and what they need to do. So let me, yes, ma'am.
So would that be a 6-month contract at $225 then?
It would be, if that's the
Half the
preference of
450?
if that's the preference of the board, I'm willing to go with that. The 450 is based on a whole year.
Right.
With the understanding that, you know, we might have a month that's, you know, a $60,000 month, and then, you know, summer might get slow, and we'd have a $30,000 month, and we would, you know, kind of get well in that. So over 6 months, it's harder to do that, so we're trusting each other if we do that.
Okay, but I just thought I'd bring that up. Thanks.
She's a broker.
Trying to negotiate.
Yeah, two things. First of all, yeah, Ms. Fisher, I understand what you're saying. Our business is to hire our board attorney, but when I was talking about the legal department, all of that factored in. I mean, when we were at square one, we were even talking about a general counsel that would do on both sides, and, I mean, there were some, if we don't know what the legal department is going to look at, even though we're on this side, let's say, it's still a factor. And I think while we're looking at these things, it might behoove us to see where are we spending all this money. But that said, I was thinking the same thing, that a year is awfully long, but if they could do 6 months and feel like it was fair, because it wouldn't be fair to the firm. And as somebody said, I think maybe you did, Kathleen, even if we're moving by the end of the year, if we decide to do an individual attorney, it's going to take a while to advertise and interview and all of that. So
can we then?
6 months is where I'd go.
Is what we're looking to agree upon is a 6-month, month-to-month contract. And within that time, given information that we receive, we may make a further decision. And actually, we're looking to hopefully make that by the end of December to decide ongoing what we're going to do.
Well, it would be a
So
6-month contract, wouldn't it? Not
Right,
month
it
to
would
month.
be-
You said 6-month, you said 6-month, month to month.
Right, but
Isn't it 6
I mean,
months?
the 6 month based on the prorated flat fee.
that's what I
Yeah,
thought we
yeah.
were saying, yes.
Yeah, well, it was confusing.
that-
what you
And it is, look, every arrangement with an attorney is terminable at will.
Right,
There's
okay.
no, you know, if you, for whatever reason, don't want to continue for 6 months and you make it 5 months, we're not, you know, you're not penalized, but
Okay.
you don't pay an
Right.
extra, you don't pay a month that you don't need. That, we don't do that in our business.
So if everyone is in agreement, let's just take consensus. Is this something we can do consensus and not have to have a hard vote?
You can ratify it at the meeting if you want, and as a good cause. We'll prepare the retainer letter and send it to you, and you can.
And then we can have that at the meeting as well.
Yeah.
So,
With respect to the meeting, I'm not able to attend the meeting on the 5th. John Quick and possibly Chris Saunders will be here for that meeting. Also, for the 14th, I am in California on business, so I won't be here on that date. Perhaps you don't need me here or my commentary, but if you felt that it would be helpful to have me participate in that discussion,
We
I
can
couldn't
get you
do it
back.
on the 14th.
that's fine. I mean, if that's okay with everyone. Ms. Jordan?
I was just going to say too, if we all go back where Rob Dodick had sent us the expense breakdown, that was back February 27th, of all the outside expenses, or most of them anyway.
Okay. All right, and we can work through that. I think the issue on the table today is the 6-month prorated contract that they will get to us by our next meeting. We can bring it up to ratify it then. So can I have consensus from everyone on going forward with the 6-month and then working on what we need to do? Okay, so we are all fine. Thank you.
6 months flat for you? Flat?
Yes. And then we will bring this up for good of the order on, good cause on Tuesday. And there's one other thing then before we leave. I would like to call a special closed session on Tuesday. I've spoken to the attorney and the superintendent about it. I'm very concerned about moving forward, doing what's strategically in our best interest for the district and for students. And this is concerning the lawsuit that we are a part of. And after having several discussions, even with some legislators.
Which lawsuit?
And the,
This is the lawsuit that challenges the House bill that we had the previous executive session regarding. I believe it's now styled Alachua County versus State of Florida.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. So, and like I said, strategically looking at our best interests and the best interests of all of the children, and also creating that collaborative relationship that we really need to have with everyone, including the legislators. And kind of jokingly, we were talking about quid pro quo, which is kind of an ugly word these days, but when we look at the fact that we did get Grow Your Own passed, we did get the legislation about our teachers and the testing and all of that, and the half-cent sales tax as well. So it's almost like we continue to get, however small or whatever significant, we do get some things from the legislators. So looking at where we stand at this point, I think is critical to us going forward. For example, the mental health piece is extremely important throughout the nation at this point in time, and our part of it is dependent upon that collaborative relationship with the legislators. So I am, were you able to schedule, we were looking at scheduling a special meeting, closed-door session next Tuesday, since everyone would be here anyway, just to revisit.
Get this out of the, Jennifer has enough time to advertise that?
No, it's a special meeting, you don't have to. It's what we were told.
So it's not gonna be where we start in here and then go into
Well, no, you have to do it that way. My understanding was that you could advertise it for 48 hours.
But it takes time to get it into the news press, and they have their deadlines, so following their deadlines, I'm not sure that I can do it. I can try, but to get it advertised in the news press.
Okay. Well, that's another issue. The advertising in the news press is a custom of the school board, which I guess is part of the policies, but an executive session by law just needs to be noticed, not necessarily advertised. So, but I think if your normal way is to do it in the press, then I think you should do it that way, because.
But we can notice it rather than advertising it, is what you're saying?
I'm uncomfortable making that conclusion without having a discussion about the custom. And the issue is this: if everybody's used to looking in a certain place for your notices and you don't put them there, then you know that there's a question of whether you're giving notice that's intended to give the public notice. So,
is it possible then for you to see if you can do it for us and just let us know? The issue is that with the legislators going back and getting started on what they're doing, it really is time sensitive that we, either revisit or make a decision or whatever. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just interested whether anybody else wants to revisit.
Is there anyone else that is interested in?
Has something changed since we last, tell me what's changed.
Okay, I'm just going to say, you, just before you go into the discussion, obviously you can discuss any matter you want publicly. When there is pending litigation, as there is in this case, you have the option to discuss it in the shade as long as you comply with the notice requirements. And so that's up to you, but I just want to point that out.
No, I'm just asking what has changed since our last discussion.
And that's why I was
Is that
suggesting a
something in
shade
closed
meeting.
door?
Yes. Yes, I was.
Well, I
Is
guess
there anyone?
Does anyone, I mean, I don't have to do that because I have not heard any new information personally. I don't know if anyone else.
But that's why I wanted to do it in the shade, first of all, to discuss the things that were stated.
Stated to yourself personally, or?
And to others. I mean, it's up to you all. I really think it's important to our collaboration going forward. And so the question is, do you want to have the session, or, yes, ma'am?
So I gave my opinion at the prior, in the last meeting. That's not changed for me. But I would be open to have a discussion, because I have spoken to the legislators, and so I don't, I would feel more comfortable repeating what they said in the shade, but.
Exactly. Anyone else? So I guess the only thing we can do is to ask for consensus for those that would agree to have a shade meeting to discuss this matter. Please signify.
Well, you have the authority to call the meeting.
Okay, and I did, but it's sounding like nobody wants to attend.
Well, and that's what I wanted you to hear, but you still have the authority to do it without.
Well, if I have the authority, I really do want to call that meeting.
Could I say something about this? I do think that it is, as I reflected back on our discussion, I think it would be advantageous just to have a full discussion relative to this issue. I think that the way that discussion went, we were focused on one particular aspect, and I think that if you're considering something of this magnitude, you want to consider the whole extent of the impact, to include if it were to move beyond the next phase. That's what we really didn't talk about, and I don't think it may not sway anybody's opinion, which is fine. I just think we want to have, it's a very important decision for all of us, and I think it's just worth a brief discussion. That's all, if that helps.
And since I have the authority to do it, we'll have a meeting. So,
Chair, if you're unable to advertise it in time for the 5th, you could perhaps do it on the 14th as part of your day.
and I understand that. It's just the concern, especially after attending the legislative meeting yesterday. Things are moving forward. They are moving forward on what they intend to do. They are making decisions and thoughts prior to going into session. And I just would hate for us to miss the mark. Yes?
We don't need the attorney there, not you.
No, I
the
understand.
other attorney.
The attorney that's handling the
Yeah,
appeal.
like.
Oh,
the
no,
last one,
we
so,
don't
yeah.
need him.
Okay.
There was some information, the superintendent is going to get that bit of information to
Okay.
have for the meeting as well, but no, we don't. And I'm wondering then, because the other part of it is having it when the attorney is here, Mr. Bierman, or one of the attorneys is here. Could we do it with Mr. Williams in case that was an issue?
I was going to suggest that his knowledge of the information about the case is, I'm sure, equivalent to ours.
So that would alleviate having to wait until the 14th. So is that okay with everyone? And if you're comfortable with that, then let's just move forward on the closest. Yes, ma'am.
And then if they can get it in for the 5th, we can do that.
Well, what we were just saying is, we were saying those dates because the board attorneys would be here, but Mr. Bierman just stated that we can use Mr. Williams as well. So.
Maybe a third date then.
A third date, so the quickest.
Okay.
So what about the 7th, since some of us will be here for the Veterans Recognition Ceremony that morning?
That's fine. I mean,
That would work. Yeah, the 14th is prohibitive for me.
5th, 7th, and, or as soon as possible. The 14th, we're kind of.
Can't do it on the 14th. We're already booked, and I'm already missing a lot of Thursday things.
Okay. So the 5th, the 7th.
I believe there's a principals meeting on the 7th.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
And that's also your
Right,
Veterans Day,
right.
which you may want to participate in, which I'll send you information.
That's why I thought we'd
We are
be here anyway.
coming. We're going to be here for that.
If we're
Okay,
coming
so
for
we'll
that,
be,
then we could.
so the 7th would be okay with you to step out for a bit to do this? From the principals meetings, or?
It depends on the schedule, because I've already, we've already moved my normal time, and there's some critical, I've got a piece that I really need to address with them, so it depends on what time this is scheduled.
Okay, so we're all just gonna pray real hard for the 5th.
Right.
About what time frame do you need? An hour?
Oh, yeah,
Probably 30
yeah,
minutes.
I don't think so.
Probably 4, because we have a 5 o'clock special.
Yes.
We're talking 4 o'clock. I will put the ad in and submit it and see what I can find out.
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
so
that'd be
much,
good.
Jen, we
Then we'll
appreciate
know.
it. And thank you all for listening to this. Since we are over time, at this point, we meet back at, what time is it?
4 o'clock.
It is 12? Okay.
12:14.
Yeah, we meet back at 1, so we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and if anyone had comments, you can bring them after the briefing meeting. All right, and thank you so much for everyone.